Chapter 1 Cerulean Christening. Their name was Nucolo, and never before was there a name one bore that held so true to its blues. They carried it like a mother would a newborn, proud of its uniqueness, and forever cherishing the graceful sense of completion it so ceaselessly granted them. They, who'd learned somehow to embrace the most inconspicuous movements of a life so turbulent. They, who were to become one with the ample accumulations yet to be recalled from their dreams. They, whose daily existence evinced its own affirmation, only found in the heart its pulsing rhythm proving the irrevocable nobility of the self, worth recovered, replenished, and redeemed at long last. Nucolo would now and forever be a name of great significance for the destiny of the bearer. To the common witness, it was, at the very least, more dignified than the label with which they'd been branded at birth, and which implied the definitions of curse, stain, and irreversible pain. Nucolo was received in reverence to the giver, and the one in whose image the receiver was created, the spirit of the ocean, oneself, who, as the progenitor to their protege, was far too cosmic, ephemeral, and vast to have been confined to any transient idea of existence. Ambiguity playing itself is the nature of water and the ways in which it moves. Movement must prelude, include, and interlude change, for when tides shift, so too does one's mood, and yet the miraculous nature of change had now been too easily mistaken for calamity. Throughout the vastly differing personalities of the human oversoul from within the confines of this dualistic realm, real change was worst fear realized. Thus, a particularly polarizing nature engraved its fate upon Nucolo's life before even having left the womb. Just as their birth name was forced upon their soul with no consent, so too was the scalpel forced upon their flesh in the same manner. What would have been a celebration of the blessing of their birth was a curse to those involved. The preceding procedure was performed from the root of an ignorantly wicked motive to fit each child into one of two ironically interdependent polarities. And even in all the atrocity of the act itself, it was seen to be one of mercy to the newborn and their family. Most of the court-appointed midwives in the land were liable to squeeze the sweet potato, after seeing that they could not truthfully be called male or female. Mothers preferred this rather than to live with the shame of having Dormadef as their next of kin, which was indeed Nucolo's birth name of curse, stain, irreversible pain. It was why the new name meant so much for their soul's escape from the initial trials of its incarnation. It sang a courteous song, in steadfast dedication to the declaration of both courage and unshakable self-loving conviction of the heart. It was a title that not only accepted them as they showed up to this world, but celebrated them too, in every version. So as time passed, they pushed the name deeper and deeper into each of their heart's 4 chambers, nicknaming their newfound self Nu, in subconscious reverence of the formless, primordial entity of Kemetic origin, known to embody darkness, infinity, liquidity, and invisibility. In the eyes of the parasites who ran the human spirit into the ground with calculated and coldly efficient redundancy, breaching the womb was the first of their transgressions. The act itself showed the most ambition, the most initiative that any action could ever possibly show. How dare one embody the force of life? How dare one attempt to reconcile the monotony of time, rectifying suffering by innocently beholding the present moment by way of first breath's hope? How dare one remember and redeem the lessons of previously forsaken past lives? How dare one embody the natural progression and evolution of the universe in whole and unadulterated splendor? How dare one be as one was, as one is, and as one will be? And yet, there were far further implications within this initial act of courageous resilience that led them to be who they are today with this new name and nickname, unbound by any man or woman's decree of what life should or would look like. The assertive persistence bubbling from deep within their soul brought the Newmen to the furthest reaches of imagination, mountains of mind that kissed the skies within, and the most fertile valleys, caught somewhere between the acts of upholding and beholding. What consistent conviction laid within the soul of Nu, if not that of an eons-old renegade meteorite, birthed in the blackest of holes and sent to earth for the sake of love upon the tip of God's golden arrow of unconditional pervasiveness? Still, the life of this ancient asteroid spirit was destined to be shaky at best and completely undone at worst. The aggravation was mostly felt at the soulless society's infectious obsession with the strange yet natural fact that Nu was the centerpiece betwixt four crosshairs aimed from whirling vortices of opinionated existence. The only appropriate responses to this ill state of being were, first and foremost, completely ignoring it, and secondly, a growl, feigned ferocity to replace the gentleness that one had to lose when the true self was forgotten. Being colored or half-caste had its own heckling issues, but being intersex had its own life-threatening issues. The most infamous nickname was half-last, referencing that not only were they half a person, but they'd also always be picked last due to the perception of them having no inherent traditional value, not as wife nor as husband. It was for these reasons that Nukolos spent most of their time at the bottom of Lake Victoria, in deep and quiet meditation. You see, when they'd inherited the name of the spirit of the ocean, the systems of their body were forever altered. Light, resonating at extreme spectrums where most humans cannot see, began filling every dark and buried crevice of their internal anatomy. Its rays moved like oceanic currents, and the feeling was very much like drowning, supposing, of course, that when one drowns, they become one with the water, aware. A soul-satisfying saturation struck them from the outside in, ripping away and revoking any doubt that may have been lingering and festering in their heart, in concern of the validity of who they were. Now, the answer to that question could never again be unknown. They were all that they could be, and nothing less. Sparking into eternity from this moment on, they'd grown into one who would wear the heart upon the skin. What was once caught in the liminal web between the dark glow of their father's ebony and the shining shadow of their mother's ivory was now released into a vivid, yet calmly magnetic magenta. In part, this was due to the blood rising to just under the surface of their skin in order to diffuse water in the most efficient manner possible for respiration. At completion, it ignited bioluminescent candor within and throughout each dermal layer. At once, the ocean centralized itself within and throughout Nucolo's heart, mind, soul, and body, and it bore gifts. Transmigration of the soul beyond the physique as a membrane and to other realms of being was inherited, yet dormant. Both the origin and the fate of this ability flowered into an expansion of the eminence heart upon renaming. That particular title for that particular soul was so harmonious that it multiplied itself through the amplification of self-respect, adding layer of dimension after dimension to Nu's field of view. Still, the eyes had yet to be opened to those vibrant rolling plains of aura. As it always does, the freedom of choice came bearing the gift of responsibility. Their skin's new hue, although at first only a blatant side effect of brilliantly augmented physiology, also carried the added consequence of leading Nu to live an even more reclusive existence. When one's colors are too bright and life-giving for the living dead to witness, then one must hide away from those zombies and let one's light shine for itself. This is the founding of foundation, and while it may have been lonely to the outside, Nu was happy to rejoice in the solitude that it granted. At this moment, they became one, forever imbued with the breath of the ocean. Before this time, at which they had barely just entered puberty, their life was a rotting experience, from the names and stones and fear that others threw their way so vehemently, to the social isolation experienced. It felt as though nothing was sacred. They had already been a carcass amongst carcasses, had already been dormidef, and had waited for a knocking at the door of death. Now, Nucolo knew deeper how to truly value this life. The art of living would prove itself capable of restoring and replenishing the innate gift of worthiness. Just as sound catches up to light, the moment caught up to the realization during nominal reclamation in real, complete, and lovingly aqueous clarity. The night of their enhancement also brought upon improved aquatic vision, which functioned far better underwater than on dry land. The Numen's inherent atomic structure reverted to a state similar to the potentiality of stem cells. Their body would metamorphose into liquid water whenever Nu would intend it to. In addition to this gift, while underwater, Nu was able to direct their body down the path most desired and to expedite their movement at any speed wished for and willed for. This playfully powerful interactivity with water was encouraged nightly through meditation and underwater breathing exercises. And yet, it was not quite as though their body had become the water, just as their breath was no longer quite their breath. Somehow, their body had always been the water, whether as wisps of vapor in the air, as thunderclouds looming over the city, or as the myriad rivers leading to the ocean's truest self. Coming home had always been a wonderfully welcoming respite, but Nucolo still couldn't quite shake the sting of cognitive dissonance that sprang from living in a closed-circuit lake. Not yet the open ocean. Not yet home. It was a residual curse left by their inheritance, a painful need to return to what was always within. Why did the ocean choose Nu to inherit these abilities, abilities which allowed them to, at long last, begin to live a life unencumbered by past strife, and instead blissed in meditation at the bottom of the most victorious lake on earth? It was a longing that could never quite be purged from Nucolo's bones, and as the pressure of the lake's depth magnified, so too did the need for closing clarity. And we have an illustration. Chapter 2: The Bluest Bond. Receptive quietude exuded from their pores as they sank lower and lower into the lake of their own manifestation, until finally reaching the muddy mineral floor at the bottom. It was more like floating to Nu, adrift with serenity, supplanting a foundation which would have otherwise vanished, unbeknownst to their soul. It was here, at the thump their pelvis made in stopping their body at the lakebed's stern solidity, that their sleeping inner self awoke, and their waking outer self was lulled into a comfortably pressurized slumber. The impact traveled up their spine and out of their scalp, an energetic bubble that burst at the surface. From the pupils of their eyes, microscopic lights whipped forth like lunging serpents, just as lively as Nucolo was limp. They danced like ribbons in the sky of Nu's mind until they reached the black backs of both eyelids on the other side. Here, they sunk their metaphorical teeth into their destination, then strummed, taut in their connection, like a tiny, iridescently woven rainbow bridge. Now was the time that the sleeping gifts Nu had been given would have no choice but to awaken and rise through the subconscious, tempted by this restful, receptive state of their being. In an instant, the soul of Nu was transmigrated to a place. It was bright, blue, and isolated, cut out as its own room completely, like a lake that was shrunk and confined to an artificial pond. While bright, the light was of an unnatural brightness, one that burned the skin with chemical sin and harshly forced its rays into the skull. A fierce whimper echoed and reverberated through the space, ricocheting hastily at first off the glass walls, then lingering and fading into weak dissidence. Nucolo felt the lifespan of the entire vocalization with their whole body. Then, and just as soon as the call had simmered into silence, the tank shook with a mighty collision, shaking all surroundings for a moment, as if to prove the false audacity of the border in the glass and the strange world that lay beyond it. Nu held their hands before their line of sight, coming to greater awareness of what was happening. The feeling was familiar, of course. Just as the brightness of their own bioluminescence adjusted itself for the unnatural light of the environment, the eminent became slowly but irreversibly engulfed in a shadow rising slowly from behind. A towering figure scrutinized Nu's small frame, and the same voice from moments ago trickled back into being. Who are you? Nucolo turned their body to see the gloomy giant from whom the voice crept. She was feminine in form and essence, with a huge body that appeared to have been made to move quickly, powerfully, and gracefully through the ocean. The colors of her skin reflected both the darkest black trenches and the glimmers of white light on a sparkling seascape. Her eyes were steady, tired, but focused. They were a shade of deeply dark and comforting black, a tad bit lighter than the black of her skin. Above and behind them were the eye spots. They made her look a bit impersonal, like if people were to look at her eye spots as if they were her eyes, then they'd naturally see something they don't understand. They'd assume a smile. But if they were able to look into her actual eyes and take them for her actual eyes, the sorrow met within would be undeniable. On her back was a dorsal fin that seemed to be always trembling from its core, reaching for movements of ghost waves left from the ocean days. Her upper jaw and lower jaw complemented like seeds of reversion for her monochromatic skin, the lower bearing a brilliant ivory white, which percolated down her belly and under two pectoral fins. They seemed too big, even for her, but they were gentle, firm and powerful, yet graceful and deliberate in their movements. At the end of her length was a beautiful tail, which trembled from the very same longings as the dorsal fin, as her whole body, really, as freedom was the only natural way. "Who are you?" She spoke again, this time inching a bit closer and scrutinizing Nu. It was strange. Nucolo had every reason to be intimidated, scared, or nervous. She was at least 5 times their size, and as her words rippled forth, she flashed her pointed, wicked-seeming teeth in a curious grin. Yet, somehow, Nucolo could feel nothing but comfort at their contact. "I'm Nucolo." At hearing their name, the black and white being let out clicks that felt as though they were amalgamating languages, analyzing, and finally affirming the name. Nucolo. Her way of speaking didn't utilize her mouth. Instead, the words came straight from her heart and through her head, flowing through the water with ease and immediacy. It was the first time Nu ever heard another being say their true name, let alone acknowledge their existence in a healthy way. It felt euphoric. "Well, hi." Her voice was comforting, and not only because it was the first one the Eminent heard in years, but because it actually eased the tension inside the deep, hidden parts of whoever heard it. The fierce whimper from before had become a soothing lull of comfort. "Why are you here?" Nucolo felt her question with every part of their body. "I don't know. I just went to sleep and ended up here." "Oh," she said. "Well, take it from me. This isn't really a place you want to be. There's nothing here for you. Nothing here for me. Just look at it." She was right. Nucolo looked around and took in the space. It was cramped, even for Nu, who was used to the openness of the lake. And even the lake was cramped for someone in whose heart lived the spirit of the ocean. If this place was this insulting to the Numen's sense of freedom, then for this being, at least 5 times their size, it must have been much worse. "Well, I'm Potcow, but the ones who've trapped me call me Wanda. You can call me Pa." She seemed dismayed, hurt, and betrayed by the false name. But at the sound of her true name, her body became joy, feeling free in itself to be itself. Nukolo empathized easily. And at hearing that true name, something inside the eminent pushed them to place the palms of their hands on Potkao's melon in the shape of a triangle, and to feel what she'd felt. Nu's empathic resilience was, by now, fortified through the many years of being called the worst of names, and of their body being expected to house the worst of shame. And, unbeknownst to them, the very lake in which they dwelt helped to transmute those feelings into worthiness. But the funny thing about shame is that most often the people who it is projected upon are the least deserving to feel it. Here and now, there was something within the one before them that needed presence, so Nukolo gave it. It was that feeling of worthiness by way of the lake's transformative ability that flowed forth from Nukolo's palms on that first fated day. Energy that had previously been hidden within the dark of their heart suddenly gushed through their arms like two rivers, trickling through their fingers like tributaries before entering Pos' oceanic melon. And just a few seconds into that touch, Nukolo saw and felt her death. It could be of suffering, or it could be of grace. It could be of both. What made the difference was the choice of isolation or connection. Either way, it would come within the next 2 days. Death was a thing that could neither surprise nor offend Nu. When one pined for it for this long in life, it became a sort of final, blissful frontier that was always just on the horizon, calling the soul back home. It was the reason they meditated for so long, allowing the practice to become an avoidant addiction. They also felt the agony Pa had experienced from having been separated from her family for so long. This feeling was brand new to Nu. They'd never known love with another. Therefore, they also never knew love and loss of another. When one doesn't have it to begin with, one can't understand the preciousness of having it and then losing it. After pulling their hands back in reactive recoil to the strange sensation, they knew that it was something even more agonizing than not having had love in the first place. It made them not want to live, but not in the way of seeking the freedom of liberation through death, in the way of feeling such a deep and bitter disconnect that there's literally nothing else to do but die. After the transmission of these sacred feelings, Paul looked into Nu's eyes the same way that a child looks into their mother's for comfort. At that contact, and in that moment of shared seeing, she realized just what was coming, and strangely, there was no fear. It may have been because Nukolo was here with her and feeling with her, helping her to feel. Only a lull of silent co-presence filled the tank. Comfort is a small word for what this provided them both. It was a moment of two lost souls in a fishbowl of pain, seeing each other and themselves as oceans for the very first time. In this, they realized the point of this isolation all along. In this, they found music where once there was silence. Then, the soul of the Numen shifted. Wanda. 2 days. I was the first they captured, recorded, held, and let languish. Stuck with a disgusting mola in my molars, some cheered when I'd slip through their grips. Like the very ocean from which I came, I moved like water, unafraid to evaporate. Still, the others caught me. For no reason, they kept me alone in the web of their pathetic pursuit of power. They let me stay in the place I did my best to chew away until sundown, then moved me to the small water surrounded by 5 floors. Beyond a few of the floors I could see. Still, there was nothing to look at. I smashed my body against all odds and died fighting. They reported my death as something else, but I'll always know the fate of my own distress. The cheerful ones will too, as will their offspring. They know the language of song. Others only know to let another languish in the deceit of underwhelming, entertaining charm. Their love was chlorine bluest, never could not be harmless. They didn't have to do it. They didn't have to start this.